A career in narcotics trafficking is like setting up fireworks in the sky. It rises quickly, produces a lot of noise, and has a brief moment of brightness and glamour before disintegrating into ashen suits. Law competition or even drug traffickers' own allies nearly invariably put an end to their prosperity. The narrative of Pablo Escobar, the king of Colombian snow, is the epitome of how quickly a drug trafficker's star burns out. Welcome to our channel, where we learn about Pablo Escobar's hidden wealth and how he squandered it. But first, please subscribe to our channel and press the bell button so you don't miss any of our videos. So let's get this started. Escobar, who was born to a low-income farmer and a teacher, was worth an astounding $37 billion by the time he was in his 30s. He was one of the wealthiest people in the world, not only in Colombia and South America. In addition to his holdings and wealth, he had $10 billion in narcotics waiting to be sent to Mexico and eventually the United States at his peak. However, this was not always the case. Even though Pablo Escobar and his cousin Gustavo Gaviria came from middle-aged families who were doing well in a good Medellin neighborhood, it wasn't enough for the two of them. The two cousins dropped out of school and began forging degrees, stealing tombstones, kidnapping business people, and eventually committing grand theft auto, which landed them in jail for the first time in 1974. This arrest proved to be a watershed moment in Escobar's life. Soon after their release, the cousins shifted their focus to heroin trafficking with a particular emphasis on Snow White. This was Escobar's first taste of true wealth, and he quickly founded the Medellin cartel with his partners, putting him on the map of the entire globe. The Medellin cartel dominated the cocaine trade at its peak, generating an estimated $420 million every week. Escobar was collecting millions of dollars in cash every day from his drug sales and other criminal and legitimate enterprises he had established after becoming wealthy. It's crazy to believe that when Pablo was nothing more than a petty thief, he was only making $3 a day. His wealth surpassed $1 million in 1984, and there was no turning back for him as his riches expanded virtually every hour from then on. Naturally, such large sums of money were unmanageable through laundering, so Pablo began investing in safe houses to hold his money. Escobar wasn't simply buying these magnificent, upper-class mansions with his money. He was also storing it in them, like vaults. Money bills have been discovered under couches, beds, floor tiles, walls, and buried beneath the dirt on the lawns of these houses, and they don't even account for a significant portion of Escobar's wealth, since additional money is hidden somewhere that no one knows about except the deceased Escobar. In 2020, Pablo's nephew Nicolas Escobar discovered decades-old cash bills worth $18 million in plastic sacks buried behind the walls of his apartment. This occurred 27 years after his uncle was killed in a police encounter. After Pablo died, Nicolas received his apartment. It wasn't the first time he discovered such wads of cash protruding through walls or floor tiles in his flat. Such apartments are a very minor part of Pablo Escobar's vast collection of properties collected in a very short period of time. Hacienda Napoles, a 7,000-acre estate located between Bogota and Medellin, was the diamond in his real estate crown. Hacienda Napoles, named after the Italian city of Naples, cost Escobar around $63 million back in the day. It had a soccer field, massive life-size dinosaur statues, artificial lakes, a bullfighting arena, a classic vehicle collection hangar, not a garage, an airfield for his drug trafficking planes, a tennis court, and a zoo. A zoo indeed. We'll get back to it later. It was also a gathering place for the Medellin cartel's leaders, including Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha, Carlos Leder, and the Ochoa Vasquez brothers. Escobar received numerous guests, both tied to his illegal activities and those on vacation. La Manuela was another of his fantasies that he built in the municipality of El Penol and named after his youngest daughter. Los Pepes, the paramilitary squad that was instrumental in bringing Escobar down, repeatedly targeted this property. La Manuela, which spanned 8 hectares, also included a soccer field, a swimming pool, and a round building connected to the main house. Interestingly, although authorities in the United States were unable to apprehend Escobar, he was purchasing safe houses in the country, the most famous of which being La Casa Rosada in Miami, Florida. This property was in a premium neighborhood of Miami Beach with a stunning view of the sea and an ideal location for constructing a pier. In 1987, authorities were able to take the property. In 2014, Christian de Barduare purchased the property with the aim of uncovering Escobar's secret treasures by dismantling the structure. He eventually sold it in 2020. Among the 141 residents he owned throughout the course of his life were Casa Manya in Mexico and the infamous prison he erected for himself, La Catedral. He also purchased and built residential houses for his workers on Caribbean islands, which are now little more than ruins and shelters for local animals. The majority of the other sites have been taken up by their respective governments and converted it into tourist attractions, restaurants, or theme parks. When Escobar, Gaviria, and their associates Letter, Ochoa Brothers, and Gacha began trafficking Snow White over the ocean, they had no idea how much money would flow in. According to George Chung, the sheer volume of currency bills was so overwhelming that cash became more of a burden than a profit. The money management aspect became so tiresome that it sapped all of the fun out of the entire operation. These traffickers, including Escobar, attempted to exchange dollars for pesos with receptive Colombian banks. But there was only so much currency conversion they could provide. As previously said, Escobar began stuffing his mansions with cash, but when they ran out of space, he had to seek elsewhere beyond Colombia. Escobar chose to send the money back to US banks since the currency that was flowing in was dollars. These banks featured counting equipment and even bank workers in specific rooms intended for Escobar and his associates. However, these types of transactions drew the notice of US officials. According to witnesses, Escobar's men were smuggling cash out and then depositing it in non-interest-bearing checking accounts worth $250 million or more per year. When US banks became too hot in the mid-1980s, Escobar began flying his money to offshore banking havens including the Bahamas, Aruba, the Cayman Islands, and the British Virgin Islands. Pablo Escobar purchased a Learjet especially for the purpose of transporting his money. Despite increased control in recent years, this strategy remains popular among drug dealers. On the other hand, Escobar and Gaviria preferred trade-based money laundering, which they refined into an art form. Pablo Escobar accomplished this by purchasing easily sold products such as clothing or electronics from a reputable corporation in the United States and then selling the items for pesos on the opposite side of the border. It was an efficient method of cleaning up enormous sums of money. Escobar also collaborated with accountants, notably his brother, to exploit banking systems in the US and Europe. Depositing amounts less than $10,000 to bypass Bank Secrecy Act reporting regulations was the most common of Pablo Escobar's money laundering strategies. It's not rocket science to recognize that Pablo's success was built on a lot of brain power, strategy, tactics, ideas, and resourcefulness. He may not have been moral or legitimate, but he was undeniably brilliant. Pablo once had a monopoly on the whole east coast of the United States drug market. His adversaries, including the Cali cartel's founders, who were all legal businesses, were no match for his dominance of the sector until authorities cracked down severely on Pablo Escobar's enterprise. Pablo Escobar was responsible for nearly 4,000 fatalities, yet he also spent money on hospitals, stadiums, and poor housing to enhance his image as the Colombian Robin Hood. He also bought a lot of shares in Atlético Nacional, one of the biggest soccer teams in South America. Players like Faustino Esparilla, Juan Pablo Angel, Ivan Cardova, Andres Escobar, and René Higuita, who performed the scorpion kick against England, were essentially on Pablo Escobar's payroll at the time. To avoid the clutches of the law, Escobar invested much in his political campaign and was elected to an alternate seat in the country's Congress in 1982. However, this heightened the emphasis on him, and he was compelled to quit 2 years later. Pablo Escobar's goals were limitless since he aspired to become the country's president one day, but the law followed him wherever he went. In the late 1980s, Pablo Escobar was the 7th richest man in the world, but he was also a fugitive. He was able to live on the run with little difficulty because his financial reserves were essentially limitless. But money can only get you so far. When Manuela fell ill while the Escobars were hiding, Pablo burned nearly $2 million in cash to keep his daughter warm. Meanwhile, the Colombian government seized his massive fleet of 142 planes, 20 helicopters, 32 yachts, and 2 submarines. His prized historic automobile collection was destroyed by enemies who set it on fire. There was a moment in his life where he would weigh cash rather than count it, and it was said that he once possessed 40 tons of it. Every year, he would deduct 10% of his cash due to rodents gnawing and ruining it. But when the authorities caught up with him and vanquished him, no amount of money could bring him back. The majority of his assets was confiscated by police after his death, but there was plenty of money to go around among his family and relatives. Pablo Escobar's wife inherited up to $10 million, allowing her to live a decent life with her son. Manuela, his dearest daughter, is now worth more than $100 million, but there is no doubt that the world will never forget how the Escobars made their money. And that ends our video. Thank you for taking the time to look at this. Please leave your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed it, please share it with your friends and subscribe to our channel for more great videos and current information. We hope to see you in more videos in the future.